I think that most people in America understand that the Mexican drug cartel is not a good thing. What I think they don't recognize is that a cartel is actually an economics term. The reason that it's important to understand how a cartel works in terms of economics is that it is actually a viable, functioning system for the people at the top. To give an example, let's imagine that the corporate boards of Taco Bell, McDonald's, and Wendy's decide that they are actually all going to work together. What ends up happening is that they start off as a functioning, viable business that provides value to the community and also to themselves because they made profit to establish their market share. But a cartel takes over when they are no longer interested in providing reciprocal value and instead utilize force and coercion in order to create a parasitic relationship between those businesses and the general public. What ends up happening is they fix prices together. So, say all restaurants increase their prices by 100% or 200%. It doesn't really matter. You might be thinking, well, then new restaurants offering lower prices would just pop up in order to be more competitive against that controlled market. However, the reality is that those larger companies will simply buy out the new competitors in their infancy. So, for example, if a mom and pop diner all of a sudden shows up one day, they could either show up with a checkbook and simply buy them out, or they could instead, for a much lower price, start paying off people who work at that restaurant, either cooks in the kitchen or a waitress serving meals, and have them deliberately ruin the quality of the meals being provided. The amount of resources at the disposal of those corporate boards will vastly overwhelm the ability of one small restaurant to defend itself against such tactics, and that's not even including the court system. Frivolous lawsuits, or what we talked about previously in a video called tort reform, are a perfect example of another avenue of attack. So we should really think about how all of this played out in terms of feminism, where controlling interests in the female community have so much influence at this point that women are aware they can behave as poorly as they want to, and it will still be profitable. If they have a child, they can misbehave and receive child support, alimony, and benefits from the state. If they wish to misbehave as professionals, they can get jobs, and if you refuse to hire them, they can sue you. If they want to misbehave sexually, they can always Me Too you. There is no requirement of evidence whatsoever. And regardless of if criminal charges are filed against the man, his reputation and career will be completely over. On top of that, she can obviously open an OnlyFans account, or if she wants a lesser version of that, become an ethot gamer girl. To any detractors to this idea, I would ask, what are the avenues for pushback? Is it something that happens in government, through the controlled media, through the controlled social media? Where would you go if you were a man seeking recourse against such a system? And if you want to know the collateral that is backing up all of this, it is access to reproductive rights and the inherent value which that holds over our society. That's the established market share that needs to take place before a cartel can take hold. And genetics are what provided that. And so for anyone out there who is thinking from a traditional conservative perspective, you need to understand this is where the overloading of the gay population and the trans population is coming from. It is men who are saying, if you can't beat them, join them. In financial markets, men of the West learned long ago that you need to have something called antitrust legislation. Antitrust legislation is a means of preventing cartels from forming, because in equity markets, we already know this is what will happen every time unless there is a countermeasure taken. In the courts of public opinion, there is no antitrust legislation. There is also no appeals process. And one of the most insidious and under talked about side effects of this system is a mental point of origin that has adopted the mentality of innocent until proven beyond a reasonable doubt. When a group of people is making a decision, they are not upheld to the constraints of the formal legal system we have built. This was not chosen to be adopted by the court of public opinion. However, the concept of innocence until proven beyond a reasonable doubt has been. And this is why there is no rationality when having discussion with most people. No evidence is required for them to form their opinion. However, it will not change unless you have completely put them in a checkmate position, which they are not going to engage in a conversation long enough to allow to happen. This is clearly not a rational way to run a society, but in the sisterhood uber alles, or in other words, the sisterhood above everything, it doesn't matter. Expand the female, support the cartel. And if you are a man, go gay, go trans, embrace being a minority. These are the paths forward.